Jeannie, you got married in the church. I got married in the church.
Mm-hmm.
So were you able to pick your priest?
I was.
You were?
And,
Perfect.
yeah.
And you had a relationship there, right?
Yes. Well, I work at the church, as you know.
That's
So
right.
So I'm a cantor, and I'm like a huge part of my church community. So it was a very, very big deal for me.
Wow.
The ceremony was probably my most favorite part of my wedding. So I wanted everything to be like really, really perfect and beautiful.
That's the whole
especially with music.
reason, right?
Yeah.
Especially with music,
Yeah.
too.
And I really loved I loved I love Father Ed, and he gives great homilies. He always says a lot of really, meaningful things, and I was looking forward to his homily actually, and what he was going to talk about. So it was a no-brainer for me.
Yeah.
Very easy, and it was beautiful.
I love that.
Yeah. How about you?
Church, and the priest was a longtime friend of our family's.
Mm-hmm.
He baptized our son.
Yeah.
And he also was, he had done business with my uncle years prior before he went to seminary school and became a priest. So
Yeah.
like long history with my family, and he kept everything very short, but he was great because a lot of people were non-Catholics that attended our wedding. And so he was very good about explaining what he was doing and why. And he felt it was a very inclusive ceremony, which is what we liked. We don't have a video of it to show you. But,
listen, that's Father Ed did the same thing. Now that you mention it, it was that was nice, because the same with us. We had a lot of people there that were not Catholic either, so it was kind of nice to explain.
Nice for people who have no idea. I've attended ceremonies where it was a completely different religion or culture, and without that, you're kind of lost.
Cool, though.
It is cool because you're like brought into it, but you're also kind of lost. So welcome to our podcast. So you're engaged.
Now what?
Today we're going to be talking about wedding officiants, and we have a very special guest, Father Vince Corso. Welcome, Father.
Hi.
Nice to meet you. Thank you for having me.
Of course. Thanks for being here.
Absolutely. So talk to us. How did this become? When did you become an officiant? We want to know this path and what brought you here.
Wow. Well, this is only an hour, so we'll have to be brief. I'm reflecting on this. I've been doing this for 40 years. Wow. Believe it or not, this is way before you guys were born, I'm sure.
Did you start when you were 10?
Well, thank you so much for that. I am a proud Medicare card holder, so let's it's my badge of honor. I started out. I was many years ago. I was a Franciscan friar in the Roman Church. I was ordained a priest in 1980. So you can do the math, and I dyed my hair a little bit today. And I functioned as a priest in that community for almost a dozen years. My training was, 10, 12 years long, and I did different things after ordination in a parish, and seminary work and recruiting work and volunteer work. And in the late 80s, began to reflect on my lifestyle and made the very difficult decision, but a good decision, to leave. And I was very fortunate. I met a wonderful woman, and Christine and I will be married 29 years this year. We have 2 children. One just graduated from college. The other one's a sophomore, going into a sophomore year at college.
That's awesome.
And so I've been doing this a long time. That's the short answer. And certainly as a parish priest, I did many weddings. And then there was a hiatus there where I wasn't doing many because of my transition. But in the year, I guess 2002, 2003, I was approached by before that, I was approached by a couple who worked for my wife and said, "Can Vince marry us?" And I said, "Yeah, no, I can't do that. I got to figure out how to do it." So I found a way to actually, they were Massachusetts residents, so you can become a justice of the peace for a day in Massachusetts. So that was the start. There's a group in the universe called it's now called City Ministries. It's a group of married Roman Catholic clergy who banded together to all provide services to couples and to other people who are looking for a spiritual approach, on kind of outside of the box religious approach to their specifically to their wedding ceremonies. So I joined that group, and I've been working in that organization since then. They have kind of underwritten us to give us permission to do weddings across the country. I'm still waiting for a destination wedding somewhere. If we could ever leave the country, whenever that's going to happen again.
Now, wait, if you're doing destination weddings, you must
I haven't yet. No,
you haven't yet. Okay, I was going to say you must be really, really good. Like
that would be cool.
we are
waiting.
flying father out.
Someday.
Okay.
But when I left the priesthood, the celibate priesthood, I went back to school to become a social worker, and I've been functioning as a social worker for the last 25, 26 years. I just retired from that. So I'm devoting pretty much all of my hallelujah, most of my time doing weddings now. I worked for a long time in end of life care and hospice care in New York, and I found that my wedding ministry was a real balancing energy to the work that I was doing every day. So what started out to be a few weddings a year, over the years has grown into this much bigger business ministry of being an officiant. And I finally found a job that doesn't seem like work, if you want to call it that. I enjoy it immensely. One of the questions that you had sent me was, how many weddings have I done? And I have no idea. I would think probably upwards of 900.
Oh, wow.
This is over 40 years, so that's a long time.
Wow.
But when I was reflecting on that number, I said, each wedding is new to me. Even though I have the experience and I've done it a long time, every couple is different. Every relationship is different. Every story is different. And that's that's my starting point, if you will.
Yeah.
So I hope that it's a long answer to your
question. That's perfect. It's funny because I mentioned I work in a church as well, and I've been doing that since I'm 15. And I love it, and I have to say that whenever I sing at a wedding, or just being present at a wedding ceremony, I guess I'll just say it that way. It's very grounding, and it kind of makes you reflect on your own marriage when you hear those vows, over and over again. So I would imagine being an officiant, and you're married too. Does that keep you grounded, kind of in your own marriage?
All the time, because I can't get up there and tell people something that I'm not doing myself or trying to do myself. So it's a really grounding experience. And I do try to connect with the congregation, wherever it is, whoever is comprised of the congregation. And I try to work into all of my ceremonies as I can a question to people to connect with the people that they love. Right. That's why we do weddings in public, right? That's why we do public ceremonies, because it's a public covenant. It's a public contract, if you will, to be who we are and to build up love in the world. I mean, and we need that today.
Oh my goodness, do we ever? It just reminds you of really, when it comes to the institution of marriage, it just makes you realize and remember and reflect on what it really is and what's most important about it. You go back to that.
That's so true. I think about the weddings I've attended, and you listen to the vows and you listen to what the officiant or the priest has to say, and you do have a takeaway with it. You leave renewed, definitely. You leave connected. So that's great. And it sounds like this is your path. Like, you found your calling.
Yeah.
And you made it yours. You definitely put the time in. My goodness, you were a priest. That is giving every ounce of yourself up.
Yeah.
I like to think so. We're human beings too. It's hard. It's a tough. I certainly look back in those years of seminary and in clerical priesthood as my foundation. I would not be who I am, without that experience.
Yeah.
And I'm still connected to my Franciscan brothers. We talk, we communicate. We gather when we're allowed to. And I remember how important those roots are. That foundation and training is really critical. Certainly my social work has helped me. I trained as a mental health practitioner, even though I did end of life work. And all that skill set, I bring all that to bear in my work with my couples. And even if they're kind of coming more or less for the ceremony part of things, I do kind of weave in those important components in a sense without them really knowing it. One of my social work professors, I went to Syracuse for my social work degree, and she says, you have great rapport. You could develop rapport with people really quickly, and I'm grateful for that. I guess I can still do that. And I had one groom tell me, says, I haven't said anything like this to anybody. You're amazing. How did you do that? How did you get me to talk about this stuff I never even knew I was supposed to talk about? So that's kind of where I really want to have people want to reflect on who they are as individuals, because that's the core of the relationship. Really.
What's the pre-ceremony like when you meet with a couple? So it sounds like you're doing a lot of this pre-work of what I would consider to be similar to like pre-Cana, which we did in Catholic Church,
Sure.
in the for our weddings. But working with couples that are outside of the church, it sounds like a very similar process that you're doing with them.
I try to keep the same process. I don't call it pre-Cana. For people who know what that term is, I'll use it, but I sort of have I provide couples with a notebook of resources that I've kind of created over the years, and it kind of changes over time. But there's a lot of stuff in there, and there's a section in it that has sort of tried and true conversations that I think couples should engage in. This is not about whether you should be married or not. These are questions and reflection points to say, okay, who am I now? What do I want to be? And the questions kind of run the gamut from the very mundane to the very serious. And I joke and I said, the questions run from who's going to take the garbage out to what happens if when one of you gets sick and can't work anymore? What happens if there's financial issues? What happens when a parent dies? And it's not so much that couples need to have answers to these questions. It's about examining how they feel about those things, right? And what would I do in a situation like that? If they haven't raised those topics in their relationship, now's the time to do that. And it's never really come up where there's been a hindrance to a couple getting married, but I really believe that those questions help deepen their relationship and the foundation of who they are. And that strong individuals make a strong marriage, and that's kind of my philosophy. One of my philosophies.
In this business, I guess, of being a wedding officiant, how does this work exactly? Do you just? I'm only familiar with the Catholic Church, so I'm wondering, is this just basically reputation based, Father? People get to know you, hear about you, listen to what you say, and then they say, listen, you gotta use Father Vince. How does that work? Do you have a style? How does that?
I advertise like everybody else. I'm on Wedding Wire and The Nod and Facebook and all that stuff. And it's kind of weird doing what I do and who I am to kind of advertise that way, but you have to do it. That's kind of that's the world
somehow.
As you know better than most. I think that so a lot of it is the reviews that couples write about me. There are a few videos of me out there somewhere that people find and kind of watch. And I think people are attracted to that or drawn to that to kind of at least find out about me. But I'm not the guy who's going to show up on the day of the wedding and do a ceremony. I just can't do that. I need to meet couples. Before COVID, I would meet people in my home 2-3 times, typically twice in person, and then multiple times, on the phone or on FaceTime or whatever, or Zoom. And since we've been quarantined, um, I've been doing a lot more of that. Obviously, all of my work has been on Zoom, but I've been doing more Zoom calls with couples, not just to plan the wedding, but also to kind of check in with them, how they doing, how they coping being locked down. Pretty much all of my weddings since March till September have been rescheduled. I've done a few micro weddings. I actually have 2 this weekend, and a few in July and a few in August, of couples who wanted to get married on that date, but then are rescheduling the ceremonies for later. So I've been trying to be a support to them. This is a tough time. People are expecting and anticipating a joyful moment, and then all of a sudden, pandemic happens, and people, we don't have the equipment for that sometimes. So I that's part of what I'd like to offer right now, anyway. Support to my couples, but I'll meet with them, talk about the ceremony initially, and then the second meeting and the third meeting kind of get more into the relationship. Who are they? What's their story? I'm kind of the guy with the mirror that day. I'm holding up the mirror to the audience, congregation, the guests. And what is it about your relationship that you want me to share through the ritual to your guests and in my reflection about you?
So this is how you're able to personalize it. Having done 900 weddings, because listen, there's videos out there. You can't say the same thing.
You can't.
Time after time, because you're going to look like an actor,
Exactly.
So you have to make it personal.
Yeah.
And so I'm assuming this is why you put the time in, so you can
I
really
put the time in. It's harder than you think, let me tell you.
I'm sure.
Try to come up with something new.
Yeah, you have your bag of tricks, things that like the audience is like, oh, that was so sentimental. You want to use that every time.
But you do, and there's themes that I kind of bring into my ceremonies, but a lot of it's driven by all of it's really driven by the couple. I say to them, look, the ceremony is your gift to your guests. What do you want it to be? How do you want to wrap that? What do you want people? My first question to couples, when they're going from the ceremony to the cocktail hour, what do you want them talking about? What's that gift that you're giving to them? And people are like, wow, I never thought of that. And that's kind of that really generates a lot of energy and a lot of time and a lot of thought for them. And so when we meet the second time, they've kind of given some thought to this, and I provide them with some resources and some guidelines as to how to prepare this for themselves. And then I'll take that and help create a ritual with them.
That makes sense.
And that's what leads to the vows too. So do you encourage couples to prepare their own vows, or why are you laughing?
Well, it depends
What's
on
your
the
view
level.
on vows?
It depends on the couple.
I love people. Listen, I do this for a living. I couldn't do my own vows my wedding day. I was a nervous wreck. As my wife will attest to, I think my knees were knocking so bad. I don't know. It's lucky we got through that. But I do encourage couples to write their own. Not everybody is built that way. So the couples that kind of get the deer in the headlights, oh no, I don't want to do that. I'll suggest, as you probably know, to write something to each other beforehand. You could read it before the ceremony, but I try to. In fact, this morning I got a vow from the bride of a ceremony I'm doing in a couple of weeks. She says, "What do you think? Should I edit anything?" And I said, "No, it's great.
Vulnerable.
I've never heard a bad vow ever.
Sure.
I really haven't. Whether they're 5 lines or 1,000 words.
I will tell you this, and this is for our listeners too. We had a couple that Googled their vows. Not everybody's a writer. They don't know how to articulate what's in their heart. So we had I think the bride went first, and she announced her vows in front of the entire audience. And then it went to him, and he looked at her and he said, I'm just going to stop now because I think we use the same website.
Oh my God.
Because my vows are exactly the same. And of course, everybody was laughing. But I do share that story often with our couples who are planning on writing their own vows. I'm like, don't use Google because it's just from your heart, however you can articulate that, or
But that's
maybe
kind of
have
cool
them
in a
prompted.
sense. That's kind of a cool story because
They're on the same
they're
page.
kind of on the same page. This is wonderful. It's really been great. I remember one couple I married in Manhattan. A couple, I think they just had their second anniversary, and they did kind of a variation on traditional vows that I ask the question and they say I do, and he just leaned back and screamed at the top of his lungs, "I do!"
Oh,
And it was
like a movie moment.
They were great. Actually, she's a producer, a theater producer. He is not. Um, I've met so many wonderful people. I mean, that's really the gift of doing this work. It's work, yes, but my life has and my family's life has been so enriched by this. The hundreds of people who've come to our home, and my wife is involved in hospitality and kind of doing some of the back office work for me and with me. She actually works for a local Episcopal church in Montclair, believe it or not. She's actually went back to the office today for the first time since March.
But didn't I hear you say you live in Massachusetts?
No, I live in Cedar Grove, New Jersey.
Oh, perfect. Okay, so you are local because I'm thinking,
Oh yeah, I'm local. Yeah.
How are we getting you to the tri-state?
No, they bust us up to They bust us up to Boston for that one.
All right, good.
No, I'm a Jersey guy.
Okay.
I was born and raised in Jersey, and I've lived all over the place, but we're back here again.
And really quick, while we're on that, I'm so sorry to interrupt you.
No.
So you live in Jersey. You have to be licensed here. What other states are you licensed? To be able to officiate?
To my knowledge, everywhere. Yeah, because of any officiant needs to be underwritten by a church body, an ecclesiastical organization. The group that I belong to of married Roman Catholic clergy belongs to the International Council of Community Churches, who doesn't have an issue with celibacy, and said, well, sure, we'll underwrite you. So our approbation, as they call it, comes from them. So that's good anywhere.
Yeah.
And I know in New York you have to register with this the clerk specifically, but to my knowledge, I'm legal in all the states.
Oh, good to know.
And there's so many different types of of ceremonies. I'm sure that after all the weddings that you've that you've officiated at. So, I mean, yeah, like what have you done? Have you done renewals where couples have been, they're awesome. I mean, to me that I love seeing people that have been married 20, 30, 40 years and then they have this renewal. So I mean, they're the best to sing at, the best to witness also. And I mean, what about other communities? Like,
I'm just going to let my dog out of the room really quick.
Sure.
Excuse me, guys.
Sure. She'll catch on when she gets back. But other communities like LGBTQ communities and things like that, So yeah, what different types of ceremonies have you officiated?
I really I've done run the gamut from very secular ones, not many, given who I am and who's drawn to me.
Right.
Mostly spiritual, religious, but a few secular ceremonies over the years, shirt and tie, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
I've done LGBTQ weddings over the years. I've done ceremonies, interfaith ceremonies, Christian, Catholic, Jewish, Hindu, Muslim, Orthodox, you name it. And those are kind of fun in a sense because, I remember there was this one couple that I married a few years ago. The bride was Greek Orthodox. The groom was Muslim. And they took a lot of heat from their families, because this was not what the families wanted at all. And, a lot of our time together was spent kind of working through that. But I was able to glean from them elements of their respective rituals. Now, this was just me. I've done ceremonies with other officiants from their other traditions, but in this case, it was just me. So I was able to kind of pull in elements from both traditions and kind of make it a unique ceremony. And I could see the faces of the guests and the families like, oh, this is pretty good. Not what they expected. one of my jobs as the officiant is to have people feel connected to the couple and connected to that moment. Like you said before about being grounded, right?
Yeah.
I want people to feel, I've been to ceremonies. I know you have too. Like, you're sitting there, you're twiddling your thumbs. Like, when is this going to be over? It's like, it's deadly. And that's the last thing I want to have happen. I just, because it's too important a day for people.
Yeah.
So what in that ritual is going to be relatable to people, who may be religious or people who are not. So the ritual that I kind of suggest to couples has elements that are familiar to religious people and elements that I think are relatable to people who are not so churched.
Okay.
And I think that's a real balance. And that comes with a lot of years of practice too.
Mm-hmm.
Right? This is not something I just pulled out of the hat a couple of weeks ago. This is something this has kind of been my life for a long time. I remember one of my teachers in seminary, you have 4 years of homiletic training, preaching training. And, you gotta be preaching not just to the person in the first pew, you gotta reach the person in the last seat. And that always kind of stuck with me. I want people in that last row of guests to feel like they're in the front.
Mm-hmm. Same
right?
thing in the theater.
It is. I'm also a musician. All my family are all musicians. It is. It's a little bit of theater. I mean, it really, in a good sense.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you got to be prepared. You have to know what you're going to say. You got to be confident and kind of draw the energy out of it, because couples are either very nervous or very relaxed and somewhere in between. So it's about kind of, okay, where are they that day? Making them feel like the world's revolving around them for that half an hour that we get together. It's a lot of work for a 30-minute ceremony when you think about it.
Yeah.
And that's typically how long they are. I mean, most venues are going to give you half an hour. I mean, that's kind of what we're working in. But it's a remark. I was telling my kids last night, and I don't really talk about theology in my dinner table. Believe me, I don't. And my kids are like, Dad, come on, But, ritual, whether it's whatever it is, a wedding ceremony is even though it's set in a moment in time, there's a beginning and an end. It's supposed to take everybody outside of that time, right? To another place. And that's what I love about this, because every place, every couple, every ceremony is very different. So I walk away from it like, wow, that was like the first time I've done that. It's quite
like a
wonderful.
high that you get almost from doing it. It's an adrenaline that it fills you with. And Jean, you probably get this when you sing and perform, right?
Yeah,
you can do the same thing over and over, but it's an adrenaline rush.
It is. It really is.
So
I don't want to make it seem like this is all about me either, because it's really not. I mean, I'm kind of just the vehicle up there, and I think I'm able to do this with couples, to have everybody focused on them and to reflect on their relationship, to feel connected. I usually ask when I start the ceremony, all my ceremony, and I do lead couples. I tell couples I'm going to do this. I'll ask everybody for a round of applause, and then I'll turn to everybody. I said, I want everybody to remember the first time they met these people, right? Mm-hmm. Whether it was a long time ago or recently, and what was it about that connection that's kept you in relationship with them? Because that's what we're doing here today, right? That's the reason we gather for wedding ceremonies. And I think I've been doing that a few years, but only twice in the last couple of years the couple say, "Oh, please don't do that," because we're just too nervous. Some people have a high degree of shyness.
Sure.
But you can work with that too. So
now you've done this hundreds of times. So do you prepare a script for yourself, or are you just like you've got it? You've met with a couple a few times and you go up there and you do it.
I have a little leather book that I use.
Oh, you do?
Oh,
you
yeah.
have a little leather book.
It's too important. Maybe 25 years ago I could have done this without a script, but No, I have a script. I mean, it's not. I mean, every ceremony is different in that sense. And the real personal piece for me is my reflection about the couple, because that's
Mhm.
unique to everybody. But I don't read the script like a phone book, but I have something to refer to just because I'm an old guy and I forget sometimes. Well, not really, not that old, but
I
I think it's important to have a, you know,
something, yeah,
Like a guideline,
you
yeah.
can't go up on your lines in that position, you know? Everybody's waiting for you.
oh yeah, no, I know. It's it's bad
So
enough trying to remember what I had for breakfast today, so it's just
I absolutely love that you have such a strong sense of your own faith, but yet you work with so many different people from different faiths and different cultures.
mhm.
So when you're meeting with them and you're preparing them, are you able to completely put, I don't even know if that's possible to put your faith aside, but be completely open to their beliefs and
Mm,
their culture as well?
I certainly try to, and I think I do.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I think faith is just one vehicle of expressing who people are and
Hmm.
how they see the world and the universe, right?
Yeah.
Um, it's a way of interpreting who God is to them, and many couples that I work with have a sense of that, and some don't, and that's have their own version of that. Not everybody sees things through my eyes, and I certainly that. I mean, if I learned anything in social work school, it's that. So I think from that standpoint, when I look at myself now to, let's say, 1985, right? I'm a very different guy than I was then, hopefully. Um, and the lens that I used then was kind of more narrow. And as the older I got, and the more experience that I had, and my own transitions in my life have enabled me to kind of broaden that lens a lot. And this just the arms out. I try to be as inclusive as I can. I mean, there's a lot of paths that people will take, and my path is not the only path.
Well, it's
It's
funny.
not.
I there's an irony in that too, because I mean, when I first started working for Live Picture Studios, like I said, I'm Catholic, and I know nothing. I don't know how to view a wedding ceremony. I didn't, excuse me, then know how to view a wedding ceremony under any other lens other than my own experiences, what I know.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, my headphones are like messy here. Um, but what's ironic about it is, at the end of the day, what I've learned, because Natasha and I meet with couples from all different backgrounds,
Mhm.
I don't know. I found that there's so many differences, but at the same time, it's the similarity is that love is love. You have two people that love each other, and they wanna spend the rest of their lives together. And for me, I just made it for me. It became very simple in that respect, and I never really had an issue connecting moving forward from that point on. I just said, I'm just focusing on the love here, and their expression of love, and that's it. We're just gonna move forward and make this the best experience that we can for them. And it was that is very unifying.
Yeah.
So yeah, I agree with you,
Yeah,
and
very
it,
true.
yeah,
And it's been
yeah.
educating too for us because, and I would imagine for you too, Father. I mean, you doing a Jewish wedding, that's a lot of educating that you need to do on,
Oh yeah.
in
The
preparation for
rituals,
this.
yeah.
The
Well,
different rituals and the Hebrew. So,
I leave the Hebrew to the cantor. I'm,
oh, okay.
interfaith ceremonies. I mean, I have a very dear friend of mine. I mean, I've done weddings with many rabbis over the years, and recently there was a gentleman who actually when I worked for hospice in New York, I supervised the chaplains and the bereavement staff in my role, one of my roles, and I hired this guy as a chaplain, Jewish, very Orthodox Jewish guy. Very young, didn't have any experience, and I said, "This guy's got something." And it turned out I was right, thank God. And he's still working in hospice almost 20 years now. He just had a baby. His wife just had a baby. So I've been doing a lot of work with him, and it's been kind of fun to have this rapport with him, this friendship with him, because it seems our ceremonies are very seamless. Every ceremony, interfaith ceremony I've done with him, people from both sides, both traditions have come up to us and said, wow, you guys like, you seem to know each other really well. I mean, just kind of look at each other and said, yeah, we do, and that makes a big difference, so those kind of interfaith connections are really important. And I think the Jewish ritual is such a rich, the Catholic ritual kind of came out of that, right? I mean, we didn't write the book on that one. We had a lot of training.
Yeah.
But there's so many elements to that are beautiful, both at the religious level, but the spiritual, the human level. That if you have the right chemistry with the person you're doing the ceremony with, it can really transform the moment, and in particular for families who are a little skeptical about an interfaith marriage. This is not unusual. So to have the ability to kind of blend and bind people together in that moment is really a real joy. I mean, it really is remarkable. It's a remarkable.
It has to give a peace of mind to the families to see their own rituals performed too, being that you have two faiths, they're coming together, and things like a unity candle, or I've seen some of our couples who have done like a sand pouring together, where they fill up one bottle and they're both pouring into it, and that's so pretty and like Jeannie said, unifying.
Yeah. And I encourage that. I mean, it's part of my little bag of tricks that I give to couples. I don't mean to minimize it.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of things you can do. I mean, I have a few that I suggest, but I said, search on the internet. There's a million things out there you can consider. I've done everything from sand to candles to memory boxes to, unity crosses. That's kind of a new thing. A couple that the bride sent me the vows this morning. They're doing a sort of a memory box that they're putting all of their correspondence from the last few years into this box, and they're going to open it in a year, which is kind of it's a beautiful thing. So there's all kinds of elements and rituals that are certainly doable in a ceremony, and I certainly encourage that. I mean, there's the candle and the sand are kind of the normal, the usual ones, but
traditional
ones, but whatever, sky's the limit as far as I'm concerned.
Creativity. And I love the memory box. I just feel like a year is too soon. Wait a little longer.
Well, actually, they were supposed to be married 2 months ago, and they're getting married in July. But they're also going to do a ceremony in a year. But they didn't want to wait that long, so they wanted. I feel so bad that that it's been so hard on couples. With the uncertainty, the venues have been holding their the contracts, and I don't want, that's not my point here, but we just don't know what's going to happen. It's been hard on people. I mean, I'm looking ahead to September, October. I'm saying, I'm hoping that the virus is not going to go away. It's not. Right. But
but at least with some of these outdoor ceremonies, as you're able to do, those are definitely more popular right now. Are these?
They are, and in a sense, I mean, I love big weddings. I mean, I'm very comfortable in front of big crowds, but those smaller weddings, smaller ceremonies can be so beautiful and so intimate and so meaningful.
I agree.
That I think I have no basis of reality for saying this, but just my reflection on what's been happening with the pandemic is the shape of the wedding industry is going to change. And what I've heard from the couples who have done and will be doing smaller weddings, they've said to me, it's really forced them to look at what's really important.
Right.
Which is their relationship. And, many of them are kind of stuck together in the house, working at home, and that's a lot of time with people,
but then you have a lot of couples who are not living together yet. They're both still living at home, and they want to get the ball rolling. So they're like, let's just get married and then we'll celebrate next year. There's a lot of that going on right now.
Yeah.
So I actually want to circle into some of the logistics of what happens from your couple's perspective. So you mentioned that you meet with them. a couple of times in your home or Zoom. So what is required? Are there courses that you're having them take, or, what's a typical, like they've signed you on as their officiant,
Okay.
and now what's expected and required?
Great question. I always give couples the opportunity to meet with me before they make a decision. I think that's kind of critical. They have to be comfortable with me, and I have to be comfortable with them, although it's usually the other way around. I really never met a couple that I wouldn't want to marry. I've been very fortunate, knock on wood, it's been a good thing. So once they've made that decision, they do the paperwork and all that stuff, my contract and my information sheet that has basic demographics about them. We set up a first appointment, either in person or most recently in Zoom. And I'll spend about an hour and a half each time. And years ago, I started out kind of getting into the interpersonal stuff first, and I found it didn't work so well. So I start now with the ceremony, kind of get a sense of what it's like. And as I ask them questions about what they envision the ceremony to be, a lot of their personalities come out in that.
It's
right?
insightful. Mm-hmm.
And I'll write my notes, and I'll take it away, and I'll write down stuff when they leave, and then I start to craft a ceremony for them, and I'll send it to them. Then we set up the second meeting, and because I think once people see their names in print, it begins to unlock a lot of ideas that they didn't have. Like what I said before, when your guests are going from ceremony to cocktail hour, what do you want them talking about? So it kind of unlocks some ideas from them. And then the second meeting and possibly the third one, we'll talk about their journey. How did they get here? How did they meet? Well, we can kind of talk about that a little bit in the beginning. But I say to them, why this guy? Why this woman? Why do you want it? Why this? Why now? What about this moment? Where do you want to see yourselves? What about a family? And what about your some of those questions I was mentioning earlier, and hear a little bit about their stories, their families, where are they in the family structure? What are their families like? How do they resolve conflict? How did their families resolve conflict? So I kind of weave all this stuff in there, and it kind of gives me a picture of who they are. And they're probably not realizing that they're sharing a lot more information than they probably thought they would. But that's so critical to what I do that day. So there's a lot of the work that's up, ahead of time. The wedding day is pretty simple, really. When
you're prepared.
Not for you guys, but for me it is. You have a lot of work on those days and after as well. And then we'll do email or face, whatever correspondence via email or phone calls to kind of finalize the ceremony. I give couples templates if they want to have a program for their guests or whatever. So that's kind of what I do. The day of the wedding, I usually show up until pandemic, usually about an hour beforehand. I will give them, just check in with the folks that are providing, like yourselves, who are providing the other services. And I ask all those questions ahead of time, but check in with the photographer, the videographer, the musician, or the DJ, just if they have any questions for me. What's the last thing you say, Father? And help with the license. I also take couples through the process of applying for their marriage license. And then I will file it after the fact. I send them all that information up front, where to go for the license. I have all the application stuff from Jersey and New York that they can reference. And then I send them the address of where you get the license, where you apply for it, and where you apply for the certificate.
Oh, that's great.
It just makes it easier.
Organized.
People just, that's not something you do every day. I do it every day. So it makes it easier for them. It's one less thing for them to have to worry about. And do the ceremony.
And how long does that typically last, the ceremony?
Well, most places give you a half an hour. So 30 minutes.
Do you fill
maybe.
it?
Yeah. Do you feel like it's enough?
Yeah, I do. I think all the buildup, all the pictures and the anticipation, and they're waiting for this 30-minute moment. I think it's plenty. I mean, I've done ceremonies where I've said mass or celebrated mass with couples, not very frequently, but I have done that. The interfaith ceremonies, Jewish Christian ceremonies, are a little bit longer, 35, 40 minutes maybe. But I think it's probably enough time. Again, it's a balance of wanting people to feel in the moment, but not waiting for it to be over.
Right. I can understand what you mean now when you say, it's harder than it looks, to prepare for all this. I mean,
Yeah.
it's.
I think that, again, my philosophy of this is when I sit back for a minute and think about what I actually do, it's almost scary because it's a huge moment in people's lives. I look back at my wedding, a long time ago. It was a tremendous moment in our families, my life, my wife's life, our families, and you're me or the person doing this, witnessing the ceremony. I think we all kind of witness, but the official witness, that's a tremendous responsibility. And people say, well, it's a lot of. I think people self-select. When people hear what I want to do with them, the majority will gravitate toward me, and some will not. Some are just want to have a simple, I don't want to make this sound in a negative way. I think I appeal to a certain type of person, certain type of couple.
What is that couple?
What is that couple? Couple who is maybe focused on the relationship and focused on celebrating that with their guests, and who are willing to maybe not knowingly at first, but wanting to share and understand themselves a bit more. I mean, I think that's really, whether you're a married priest or a rabbi or a parish priest or whatever, I think that's ultimately the responsibility that any officiant has, to be able to draw out of the couple those elements that make them who they are as people, and who they will be as a couple, as a family. I mean, that's the core of that's the foundation of our universe, really. Whether it's a man and a woman, two men, two women, it doesn't matter. That relationship is what is really magical.
Love it. I forgot to ask you, do you go to rehearsals? Do you attend rehearsals?
I get asked that a lot. Typically, no. And I'll tell you why. I mean, I will, if there's a high anxiety level on the couple, I will. But I found that most venues kind of run the ceremony rehearsal just prior to the ceremony.
So you're there. You just come for that.
I think in the old days, they would have a rehearsal the night before and a dinner. That still kind of happens. A lot of, given the time frame and the season, I'll typically have a wedding the night before when a rehearsal dinner is. So I typically don't do that. And it's rare that couples have had a hard time with that. I have done a few, just to kind of add a dimension of calmness to in a couple's relationship, or just to relieve any anxiety. But I get there so early that if there's any questions or any concerns about how people are walking, but the venues do a great job with this. I mean, they really are. I've learned stuff from them.
Yeah, they stay very organized.
Organized.
They know,
to say the least. It comes up a couple times a month, but
it does. Okay, I'm sure.
Well, plus, a lot of places are far away, and it's a long, it's a long distance to travel sometimes.
Yeah.
So, Father, before we wrap, you've given us so much advice about marriage and couples in general, but for our listeners who are newly engaged and they're out there and they're actually looking around to find the right officiant, what advice do you have for them? Like, what questions are important to ask? I know it's a feeling that you get, but are there specific things that they should look for in an officiant?
Well, I think there has to be a level of comfort with the person that's going to witness their marriage. Now, that's very high level. I would suggest to interview people, ask questions, what sort of what you were saying before, the personal piece, how much, anything that I write, people see ahead of time, right? So there's no surprises. My reflection might be a bit of a surprise to people because I kind of work on that prior to the ceremony, but the actual things that I say, couples will see ahead of time. I don't kind of generate a script and, you can pick one from column A and one from column B. But there are people that are comfortable with that, and that's fine. I mean, I cast no aspersions for that. I would want couples to reflect on how much of their story do they want to be told that day, and can that person who's witnessing their marriage, do they have the ability to convey that story, right? And I'm a kind of a unique person in the sense that I have a very different training than a lot of people do, but that's critical to me. And I think people who have looked at my website or whatever, however they find me, kind of know that, and they kind of gravitate toward me. But I encourage couples to shop around and find out who feels right and who makes them feel welcome, right? That's kind of what's important.
It's so personal. Like you create everything very unique to each.
I try to.
Molding it around them.
That's what I've gotten.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for joining.
Thank you, Father.
Joining today and your insight. Truly, it's a different perspective that I have now for officiants because.
Well, thanks. I certainly appreciate the opportunity. I mean, what you do and what musicians do and all the other elements that go into making a wedding a celebration, it's so important. You set the tone as well. So, kudos to you and your company and other companies like you. We're all doing this together. We're all celebrating this new beginning of a couple as they embark on this journey. It's true.
It's
a great thing, man.
Yeah.
Can't beat it. Can't beat it.
I want everyone to know how they can find you. So please, you can follow Father Vince Corso on Facebook and also on your website, right? So it's fathervince.com.
Fathervince.com.
Father Vince.
Easy to remember.
I'm on the wedding wire in the knot. I mean, just type my name in and it'll be there.
Father Vince Corso. So that's how we can find you if you're listening.
You can find me.
That's great.
I hope I run into you soon along the way. I wish you and your families well and stay safe and
to yours.
Healthy.
Thank you, Father.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It's a pleasure.
To all the listeners, thank you guys so much for tuning in today and just kind of getting, I hope you guys got some helpful information from listening to Father Vince. I know that Natasha and I did as well. Please subscribe and rate us on Apple Podcast. Again, that really helps us.
That little rating really helps. That's what puts you on the map as a podcast. So please just take 2 seconds and go on Apple Podcasts and then give us a rating.
And our website, visit our website, podcast.livepicturestudios.com. And follow us on Facebook and Instagram at Live Picture Studios.
And you can email us too at podcast@livepicturestudios.com or just hashtag LPS podcast. And this is where you can email any of your questions or ideas that you have for our next episode. If you want to come on, please. Anything that you'd like us to share would be great.
This episode is powered by Kvibe Go Live. It's been produced by Quali, Natalia Delgado, Marcia Rosa, and Mark Falcon, and our editor, Nicole Palmetti. Music has been provided by Ian Post. And Artlist. All
right, until next time, thank you so much. Bye-bye, and happy planning.
Bye, guys.